When he spoke, I recognized his voice. When he spoke, his way I made my choice. When he spoke, that man of Galilee. Oh, yeah. When he spoke, the crowd would gather near. When he spoke, death was made to hear. When he spoke, that man of Galilee. Peace, peace, people. Welcome to Yemima's World, the Jelly Moose's Cafe. I am your hostess, Yemima, and welcome to Hoodoo Sunday. I will be devoting Sundays to hoodoo history, hoodoo icons, hoodoo work, hoodoo the future, hoodoo the present, hoodoo the past. Who do you love? The song that you are listening to at the beginning is by the Clara Ward Singers and it's called When He Spoke. Now, there are different versions of, well, not versions, but different gospel artists have covered this song. This song is very special to me because my great aunt, my grandfather, who I never got a chance to meet, his sister used to sing this song in church on Sunday mornings. And my great aunt Belle was 5'2" tall and 5'2" wide. She was a short, stocky, stout lady, a plus size queen who on Saturday nights would make homemade wine and carried a derringer in her purse. And then on Sunday morning, she would sing in the choir and praise her God. And that is who she was. So I do not own the rights to the song. As you are making your way to your houses of worship this morning, or if you went to the early service and you are making your way home or to brunch, again, I encourage you that if you are having brunch, please, 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 it is paramount, it is integral to our survival that you go to Black owned restaurants and please let that dollar bill circulate through our community more than one time. I pray that the Most High shower you with blessings today and that the ancestors fill your heart with memories of their presence when they were here in the physical. All right, so I am reading this book, The Secret History of Memphis Hoodoo Root Workers, Conjurers, and Spirituals, written by Tony Cale. And it is a wealth of information. If you have not purchased this book, I highly recommend it. It has a lot of information about our hoodoo practice. And today, I just wanted to lift for today's sermon. I'll be lifting from the book of. I'm just kidding. So I wanted to just share some information about hoodoo and its connection to Africa. And I know that we often say that, hoodoo is African American, but the first word in that description is African. So just about everything that we did prior or during the Ma'afa, during the slave trade, during the time of chattel slavery, are remnants of what we practiced when we were in Africa. They are what our bones, our DNA, our internal psyche has held on to. I've heard, I won't say a lot of people, but I did read, and I can't remember where I read it, but the Huida people of West Africa, that is where the word hoodoo came from. I don't remember where I read it, but I don't know. Um, uh, you know, Europeans have a hard time pronouncing anything that's not broken English or Portuguese or Spanish or French or Dutch. Any language that's not European, they have a hard time pronouncing the words or understanding the words, and so they will uh, pick a word that sounds good to them, and we go with it. So I don't know. But the practice of hoodoo, and according to this book that I'm reading, the practice of hoodoo, root work, and conjure, they began to appear among Africans, among the slave population. And this book is about Memphis hoodoo. So he's talking about that it appeared among the early slave population in Memphis. So if the practices of hoodoo began to appear among the early populations of those that were enslaved, where did it come from? Where did those practices come from? Um, while a very traditional practice in Africa, the use of roots, herbs, and various rituals by the African American community was looked at on with disdain by the general public. So even our doctor in Africa used roots, herbs, and plants to make medicine. And so we had to adopt that practice when we were brought here because they weren't taking us to any doctors. And I think I've said that before in one of my previous episodes. So we had no choice but to adopt using herbs and plants and roots when we came here. And it says the general public. Now, the general public was white folks. During slavery, we weren't the public. We were on the plantation. We were hidden out of sight. We weren't the general public. The general public were white folks. They looked at it with disdain until they needed it. So there have been many instances, and if you read the slave narratives, if you read some of the real history about our people, you will see that a lot of the enslavers, when they got sick, they would call upon the root worker or the conjure woman or the herbalist or the practitioner, the hoodoo practitioner, um, to come and save the massa or save the mistress or save the children. They went to those root workers also, even though they wanted to say they looked at it with disdain. Then in 1866, and this is 1866, this is a year out of right after the Civil War. As early as 1866, newspapers in the South started reporting about the works of root workers and the hoodoo culture. So it was so important. It was so powerful that newspapers started talking about it. And uh, I have to go back and find them, but I have clippings of newspaper articles about they're talking about hoodoo and root workers and conjurers and things of that nature in white newspapers. We ain't had no newspapers. Not in 1866, not no public newspapers like that. We had some underground newspapers because, again, it's 1866. We shouldn't really, I'm gonna be honest with you, in 1866, we still are still just learning how to read. So there were not a whole lot of us that could produce a newspaper and get it printed and sent to the press for Black people to read. So these newspapers, it's white people talking about the power of hoodoo, and they're afraid of it. They've always been afraid of Black intelligence and Black power. The root workers and conjurers in Memphis were always under scrutiny. They were frequently being accused of being a con artist, drug dealers, and murderers. Now, I don't know what time period he's talking about here. I didn't even know they used the word drug dealer back then, but hey, what do I know? Um, that they're accused of being con artists, drug dealers, and murderers. Again, all of those things to sow division um, amongst Black people, which is something that they've always done. Because the way they sowed division when we were enslaved, of course, it was light skinned Blacks against black skin, black skin, or dark skinned Blacks. Um, They sowed division. And now that we were free, they still have that fear of, if we come together as a community, as a group, as a nation, it's over for them. And so, what better way to do than to sow division amongst those that actually did the work, that were hoodoo practitioners, that were conjurers, that were root workers, that were healers, that were, things of that nature, and sow division and say, hey, you know what? These people are con artists, murderers, and drug dealers. All right, so now, during the late 19th century, so this is still the 1800s, this could be right after slavery or right after, quote unquote, the freedom of our people. The late 19th century hoodoo products, it began to appear in pharmacies and from cosmetic companies that catered to the African American community. Now, once again, this is right out of bondage. This is right after the Civil War. We don't own no companies. We ain't mass producing nothing. We don't own any companies. So these pharmacies that are carrying these things, like candles and oils and powders that became available through mass marketed catalogs. Again, we were not producing these mass marketed catalogs. So once again, who was making money off of our intelligence and off of our spirituality? White folk. And even if you look at today's time, there are it's growing. Thank goodness to the Most High. I give you honor and glory, and to the ancestors. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving us the knowledge. And I'm grateful that people have the wisdom to use the knowledge that the ancestors are now imparting to us. A lot of the botanicas that we go to that have the candles and have the oils and things, unfortunately, they're still being mass produced by white manufacturers. And then the botanicas are ordering from these places and reselling them in their stores. There are some botanicas. There's one down here in the 757, Botanica Ade, but Botanica Okan Ade. They have candles in there, but they have herbs and things that the owner actually goes out and gathers. She doesn't buy them from other places. She and I will link their shop. If you're in the 757 area, I don't know if they ship, but their African statues, everything that they have, most of the things they have, mostly everything, but most of the things that they have in the store, especially when it comes to the herbs and things of that nature, are things that are foraged from places where our ancestors would have walked. We have quite a few swamps areas down here, and there's the places where our ancestors would go and hide. And she goes out to those areas to gather different herbs to bring into the store. So you're getting the real deal. But unfortunately, we have a lot of botanicas that are getting things from you know, manufacturers who are white, and they're getting those things and they're reselling them in their botanica. But again, we have a lot of people, and I know. Look, drop your if you are a botanica and you have things in your shop that you grow yourself. If you have candles that you actually make and you're not buying them from another place, put your information in the comments, the link to your stores. Please do. Um, and by all means, I hope someone will tap into that and get things from you. But going back to the book, it says that they catered to the African American community. So they would um, they would put images of African Americans, Native Americans, and Indian Hindus on the products to make it sell better and faster. And then also, the picture that you see is taken from the Library of Congress, and it it's a picture that was drawn in the 1890s. A man named Nathaniel Currier and James Marriott Ives ran a series of prints called the Dark Town series. And the series depicted African Americans in overtly racist stereotypes. They painted, they printed pictures like this because that was what the people thought hoodoo was. And by the late 1960s, the practice of hoodoo was still perceived by many as a form of witchcraft, being a quack. The Memphis police, they used to go in and they would round up practitioners that were practicing hoodoo. They would take their herbs, their oils, and their ritual tools. And um, police back then would take things that didn't belong to them. And of course, when they confiscated them, daggone well, they didn't just leave them at the police station. Of course, they would probably take them home and try to use them or resell them themselves, the same way they do nowadays when they take pew pews and street pharmaceuticals off of suspects. They don't leave them in the police station. They use that, or money. They use that, they take it home and resell it or what have you. So it's no different from 2024 than it was back in the 1960s. So it says that hoodoo and African American spirituality, it continued to evolve, and it had to in order for us to be able to survive. Some scholars believe that the practice of hoodoo began to be incorporated in religious organizations known as spiritual churches. I've said it before. We did not have Baptist churches. We had the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and then we had the Kojic Church. But those were mostly, we had spiritual houses. And even when we had the African Methodist Episcopal, which we still have today, and we still have the Kojic, they did not operate like white churches. They were still operating as spiritual churches. The churches followed traditions of the Judeo Christianity, but they also incorporated the practices of African traditional religions. The first Black spiritual church in New Orleans gave birth to an entire movement of spiritual churches known as the Eternal Life Spiritualist Church that was started by Leafy Anderson in 1920. And I did a whole series, a whole episode on Queen Mother Leafy Anderson. I believe it's Spiritual Powerhouses, so please go back and listen to that one. Um, Spiritual culture throughout the United States started to spread, and the popularity of this new religion, which was not really new, it was ancient, it spread, and the founders' assistants were sent to Memphis to start a chapter of the church. This would become one of the first many spiritual churches in the Memphis area. So we had a lot of spiritual churches. Unfortunately, we don't anymore. A lot of our churches have assimilated into Western culture, and we have lost our way. We no longer honor our ancestors. We no longer honor the wisdom of our ancestors. We prefer the wisdom of Solomon, a man who may not have ever existed. We don't know. I mean, he may have. I don't know. But we prefer the wisdom of Solomon as opposed to the wisdom of Imhotep. We prefer the wisdom of Moses instead of the wisdom of Tutmosis. We prefer the wisdom of Esther and not the wisdom of Queen Nzinga. We prefer the wisdom of um, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John instead of the wisdom of Martin, Malcolm, Medgar, and Marcus. But we'll get there. We'll get there. I have confidence in us. We will get there. All right, so that's it. Short and sweet. Hoodoo Sunday. Just remember your ancestors and what they did. Tap into that wisdom. Uh, I heard a content creator, and I won't even say who it was because I really love his show. I love his podcast, and I love his show. Um, and he made a statement that I just didn't agree with, and it's okay. And he said that and he was talking about people who are learning hoodoo now, and that in most families that had hoodoo practitioners, that gift or that knowledge of hoodoo was only passed down to one child, meaning the other siblings didn't get that hoodoo information. They may had other spiritual gifts, but hoodoo was not one of them, and I couldn't understand that, why he thought that. But he said that if you're he said something alluding to the fact that if your a great grandmother or grandmother or mother practiced hoodoo and did not teach you, then and they are dead, then your ancestors are dead. They're gone. They're not here anymore. So it's really going to be hard for you to get the teachings about hoodoo if it wasn't passed on to you before they passed away. Well, I can say this: the teachings within the confines of the word hoodoo were not taught to me by my mother or my grandparents. I only knew one of my grandmothers, and I only knew one of my grandfathers. I did not know any of my greats. I'm an older person, I'm a seasoned person. The younger people nowadays, you have access to your grandmothers and your great grandmothers. I didn't have that access to all of them, but I did grow up watching my mother do things that I now know is considered hoodoo. And no, she did not sit me down and say, "Hey, you do this, you do this, you do this." But I watched her do things. And a lot of times when I'm trying to figure out how to do something, her ways of doing it will come into my memories, and I'll remember, oh God, that's what mom used to do, that's what grandma used to do. And I realized through my journey that that is hoodoo. And not only that, my great grandmothers who were hoodoo practitioners still teach me spiritually through dreams, through divination, through other ways of how to do this hoodoo walk, this hoodoo journey. So I definitely disagree that if they didn't teach you while they were here in the physical, they can no longer teach you. Now, of course, there are some things that you will have to find an elder to teach you some things, but best believe your ancestors are still able to spiritually teach you things. And for you to be a hoodoo practitioner and call yourself such a spiritual person, I would think you would know that. But again, I love their content. I think they have a great show. I'm not going to mention any names. All right, so that is it for today. You know the drill. Love yourself, love each other, give yourself some grace, give each other some grace. We are our ancestors. Honor your ancestors. They will honor you. Like, share, and subscribe. I am so close. I'm so close to 100, and I'm going to keep going until I get 1,000. But I'm happy that I'm so close to the 100. Um, Please like, share, and subscribe so that we can do these Hoodoo Sundays and that we can share some information. Don't forget, if you have a botanica, that it is Black owned, and if you produce your own um, materials that you sell, if you make your own candles, if you make your own, if you gather and forage your own herbs and make your own oils, any of that, put it in the comments, please. I love to share information of Black owned businesses. If you are a white owned business, please do not put it in the comments. And I mean that with all 10 toes down and chest puffed out. All right. So until next time, stay cool, stay warm wherever you are. I love you, family. Peace.